Morning, folks. I'm just going to change the meeting settings so that we actually can just have everyone bypassing that lobby. Let's do that.
Happy.
There we go. I think that should do the job. Good morning. How is everybody?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I can't quite tell if it's a Tuesday or a Thursday, but that might just be me.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
All right. I'm just going to give people 1 minute and then we will kick things off. I'll share my screen as well. It looks like it's still forcing people into the lobby. Wonderful. Let's see what happens when I do that. Yeah, Friday. I'm with you, Nicole. I'm here. I hear. Um, what I'm sharing with you is a link to the Padlet wall that I'm using as my dance card for today's session. It is going to be an interesting one because we're talking about Zoom. So presumably I'm going to spend some time in Zoom. And of course, we are launching it from within Teams as a starting point. So how I manage that will be, I guess, reflected in your comments about how the session has run or not run afterwards. But it is an interesting one because a lot of people have more or less some familiarity with Zoom. Some people are what I would call power users of the platform, and others really have barely touched it maybe or even watched someone else use it. So there's all shades in between. Most people that have been teaching at CSU at least for a little while are familiar with using this platform if they've got online cohorts. But the other thing about Zoom is that they are an absolutely prolific updater of their software. There is a new update to Zoom that happens effectively, I don't think it would be too far off to say once a week. There has been some type of adjustment to the platform and a formal update release at least once a month. Now, sometimes that will be small things that you don't care about and things that the university hasn't necessarily subscribed to. And other times it can be major. And that has happened in the past where I think shortly after COVID struck, for example, there was an update to Zoom that if students had not updated their version of Zoom, it didn't allow them to actually participate in any of the type of interactive activities or engagement that was available in Zoom. So all sorts of things to look out for. So the way that this is going to work this morning is I'm going to talk about a few things that I look out for initially before I launch an actual Zoom meeting, just to draw your attention to those. And then I'm going to launch a Zoom meeting and look at some features, and then I'm going to get you to join me in that Zoom room. So we're going to potentially jump out into a Zoom room at the same time as being in Teams. So it's going to be very, very strange. Um, and then we'll see where we end up time-wise. Now, feel free to put comments, questions, etc., either into the chat in Teams, or you can put them onto the Padlet wall if you like. I have shared the slides from this through the Teaching Academy event list as well. All right, so let's start the slideshow as such from Padlet over here on the right. All right, so we're talking about engaging online learners with Teams. And the very first thing I want to mention to you all is the biggest problem that we have in terms of errors lodged with Zoom in terms of access for either yourself or new academics or casual staff getting access to the boards, etc., is always to do with whether or not people have logged into Zoom first. So it means that before you ever launch a Zoom meeting, really what I advise is that you do one simple thing. Now, if I just check microphones, etc., I might just mute you from there. Okay. Um, and the way that you check that you're logged in to Zoom with the right account before you launch a Zoom meeting is to open the Zoom desktop app. And what I'm talking about there, if I minimize, get rid of this and this, If you're on a CSU work computer, you will notice that there is a Zoom desktop icon, this blue one with the word Zoom in it. If you're on your own device at home and you can't see it on your desktop, just do a search for the word Zoom and you will see this object that opens exactly the same thing. They call it Zoom Workplace now because there has been a move to get more functionality into the Zoom desktop application beyond the thing that we use it mostly for, which is online meetings. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about in a second. I'm going to open the Zoom desktop app and it gives us this box. Hopefully you've seen this before somewhere. And when you open the Zoom desktop application, you notice that it's now called Workplace up the top here. Let's make this full screen if that helps at all. Move this out of the way. Thank you, Teams. Where can I put that? All right, now the thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of checking your logins, you do it very quickly by clicking on your profile image. It's a tiny little thing up here in the corner that you can left click on and it will show your name and the account you are currently signed in with underneath the email address there. Now, as long as that says @csu.edu.au, then we're in business. That means when you join a Zoom meeting, whether it's in Brightspace, whether it's anywhere else, you are using your CSU staff account, which is an enterprise account, and that means that there's no limitations on it in terms of access. A public account for Zoom, like it is free, people can get access to free versions of Zoom accounts, has, for example, a limitation on how long it can run for. You can't have a Zoom meeting for more than 40 minutes if you use a free version of Zoom. So you need to be logged in with your CSU account. And if you're not logged in when you come in here and you can't see by left clicking on your profile image @csu.edu.au, then you really need to sign out. It's going to bring you back to this base screen. We want to sign on using this single sign-on, SSO. It's going to say which domain, and the name of our domain at CSU is charlessturt.zoom.us. So I'll put that into the chat. charlessturt.zoom is the domain name. And if you ever want to get to what we call the Zoom portal, which is a web page that does a lot of the same things as what we're looking at here, you can extend that to charlessturt.zoom.us. That is the web address that takes you to the Zoom portal. So we've got two things that I just want everyone to be comfortable with in terms of terminology. We have the Zoom desktop app that we're looking at here, and we have the CSU Zoom portal, charlessturt.zoom.us, which looks like this. See the difference between the two? Let me move this out of the way so I can see faces and things. All right, so the desktop portal, the desktop application that we're looking at here with these icons is a light version of getting access to all of your settings for Zoom. It's not comprehensive. It doesn't kind of give you a deep dive into all of your settings. It gives you some of them. It also allows you to view some of the core functionality in Zoom Workplace, such as some tools we're going to talk about today, like the Clips tool that you may be familiar with, the Notes tool, things like surveys and whiteboards. You can create them all here outside of actual Zoom meetings, creating them in advance. So the desktop app has some functionality, which is quite handy, but I think most staff would be more familiar with coming into the Zoom portal, the web page, clicking sign in, and then going for a dive through their settings and things in here. This is kind of what we call the back end of Zoom. Most people come in here if they're looking for things. So two terms, Zoom desktop app and the Zoom, let me bring up my shared screen, the Zoom desktop app and the Zoom portal. Okay, one's a web page you go to, the other one is the application you open on your desktop. So the main reason that people are coming into the desktop application is to check their logins, as I mentioned, and the other thing is to check whether or not Zoom needs to be updated. You do it at a click from the desktop app. Left click on your profile image and then go down to check for updates. Click on that and it will tell you what version you're on, and you may find that you're in for a nasty surprise when you click on it today, for example, that you are many versions out of date. You can't install an update when you're in a Zoom meeting, so don't try and do it when you've got 40 students in there and find out that you need to update. It needs to happen outside of the meeting. It'll take about 20 seconds. So maybe do that at some point today. Open the desktop app, check for updates, and update your version of Zoom. So in having said that, as long as you've checked that you have the right CSU account identified up here under your name, you're not going to have any problems when you use Zoom in Brightspace, for example. And this is my segue of saying, let's look at Zoom inside the LMS, and I can talk about some features in there. So I hope that was smooth enough for you. Let's get this out of the way and have a look at Brightspace. All right, so inside Brightspace, we have built in an integration with Zoom into the communication menu called Online Meetings Zoom. Hopefully you've seen this before. If it's your first time, I think you're in for a treat. This tool will communicate between your Zoom account, which we've just checked to make sure we were signed in to the right Zoom account, and the subject site, and connect those two identities. So Lachlan, with his CSU account in his subject site in Brightspace, his account will now sync up with his Zoom settings, which are signed in. I'm going to open that up. And it's loading the integration in the background. It's a little slow, but basically it's embedded inside the subject site and will load now. And this interface is deliberately quite simple. There's not too many different sort of, not too many ways you can get lost inside the LTI. It lets you do things like schedule Zoom meetings from here, which I'm going to do now. It asks for some brief information. So I'm going to put in something like weekly online meeting. Maybe I'll zoom the page in a little so we can get a better look at this. Weekly online meeting. Then we put in, don't worry about putting a description in. It's not visible to the students anyway. Leave that blank. When do we want it to happen? The first one? Well, I'm going to say that it's going to happen next Tuesday at 7:30 at night. Don't worry about the duration. It's 1 hour by default. You can have it for as long or as little as you like. But setting it as the duration has no impact on how long the meeting actually lasts. So maybe just leave it as the default. It should pick up on the time zone of your device, wherever you are, when you set the meeting. And for students accessing it from other places, it will reflect their time zone. So it should automatically sync those things. Then underneath, we have a little box here that says recurring. If I'm setting up a weekly online meeting, I do want this to be a recurring meeting. It's going to be happening every week. And you'll notice that the first box that it checks is based on the day that you create the meeting. But I said I wanted it on a Tuesday night, not Thursday. So what are you doing? Tuesday, not Thursday. So this is about Zoom trying to preempt what it thinks you want. But in fact, it's Tuesday nights. And then you need to put in either a specific number of occurrences or a date that you want it to finish by. Can I suggest you use this option and put in a date at the end of session? Trying to count the number of occurrences, etc., takes a bit longer, but also it doesn't always work, and it might cut off the number that it shows there, the number of sessions. So I'm just going to pick a date and say, well, if 30 finishes sometime in June, let's go in there and say April. What are we doing? Oh, it's skipping years. No, we don't want to do that. Thank goodness. Okay, so let's say June, end of June, that'll do. Then it has some of the base options that we have set as default at CSU. We don't require registration. We don't set passcodes for Zoom meetings because we're in a subject site. They already had to log in to get here. A waiting room simply means that anyone who is not authenticated as a CSU user will get stuck in a lobby waiting for you to admit them. So if a student has signed into the subject site, for example, they will pass straight through the waiting room and join the meeting. That's how the waiting room function works. And the same for staff. So again, if you've got other markers or other people needing to use your Zoom room, you get to remind them of the importance of checking that they are signed in properly into Zoom. If you're signed in properly, you won't hit a waiting room and it will recognize who you are in the subject site. So Lachlan, the subject convener, will be able to host the Zoom meeting. If you're not signed in properly, you might have problems with that. So that's how the waiting room works. By default, I have cameras and mics off and people opt in to using them when they come into meetings. Now, do you allow the students to join before you turn up? That's a consideration for you. If there is no host in a Zoom meeting and people turn up in it, it will cut out after 10 minutes. It will kick them out. Basically, it needs a host license being used to keep running. As I mentioned up here, I have people muted when they come in, but they can unmute themselves. And then underneath here, do I want the meeting to be recorded automatically? This is a very interesting one when you think about whether or not you allow them to join before you, because we shouldn't be recording people without telling them they're being recorded. By the way, you're all being recorded today in this team session. If you're going to have the students being able to access the meeting before you turn up, then leave this unchecked. If you want to record automatically, make sure that you're there before the students. So it's one or the other, not both. All right, then you have some advanced options underneath. By default, you're creating the rooms for yourself unless you have Zoom scheduling rights. I'm not going to talk about that today, but if you're interested in learning more about it, send me an email. I'll talk to you about it. Alternative hosts. This is an interesting one. If people have signed in properly to Zoom and they are added as teaching staff in the subject site, you don't need to set them as alternative hosts. It will recognize that they're co-teachers. They can use the Zoom room, no problem. If, however, you're paranoid that things just don't work the way that they're supposed to all the time, and you want to add them directly, then you put in their email address in here, and it will add them. So, for example, if I said, oh God, who do I know? I don't know anyone. But anyway, you could put their email address in there, and as long as they have a Zoom account at CSU, it will add them as a co-host. They do the same thing. Anyway, let's hit save. I don't want to get too far off track today. We've created a recurring weekly online meeting in Zoom. It's giving me a summary of that information here. I could go and copy this address and share it to people elsewhere if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that right now. Clicking on this little home icon up the top will take me back to the Zoom integration homepage, and we can now see all of my recurring meetings in a list. There's a link which will allow me to just jump straight into those meetings. Same for students. They will be able to jump into those meeting rooms. If any of these meetings I don't want, let's say they happen in the mid-session break, for example, you can delete them over here on the right. So that one's no good. Do I want to delete all of them or just this one? Just this one. So basically, if you only want 3 particular dates that you're doing this thing, you just go through the list and delete the dates that you don't want. Let me stop there for a second just to check the chat and comments. Am I going too fast, folks, or are we all right with what I'm doing at the moment? Okay, getting some nods, that's good. How do you set up a meeting without a date and time? Excellent question. I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. What I do want to point out, because we have set dates and times, is that Brightspace now has taken these dates and put them into the subject calendar for all of the students. So if I go back to my homepage in my subject site and check my calendar, you'll now see that our weekly online meetings have been added in the calendar for all of the students as events. And if I click on those items, there's the link to join the meeting that students could come into if they wanted to. Because this is an event in the calendar, we can actually edit these events. And if I wanted to, I could do things like add attachments like slides, etc., to the event. If I wanted to restrict who gets to see it in their calendar, I can now restrict it to particular cohorts of students. So only Bathurst distance students see this invite in their calendar. So you, Nicole, just to your comment, I have a feeling that you created them not inside the LTI, but in Zoom directly. And that's why they're not in your calendar. But I'll talk about importing afterwards. All right, so if I wanted to restrict this to particular cohorts of students, I can. So because it's an event in the calendar, you can do more things to it, is what I'm getting at. If I save this now, only Bathurst distance students will see it in their calendars and be notified of the event. However, all students can go into the communication menu, into online meetings, and see every one of the meetings that we've scheduled in here. There's no way to restrict that. So either you have to be okay with the fact that if they come in here looking, they can see the meetings that are coming up, and any recordings that you make from those sessions will be visible to those students underneath cloud recordings. So this is kind of the swings and roundabouts, I suppose, of this tool, is that when you create meetings inside the LTI, all students can see them if they come into online meetings. Similarly, any recordings that you make, as long as you haven't limited the visibility of them, students will be able to watch those recordings, all students. So it's just about whether it's on the home page in the calendar. That's what you have some level of control over. Now, while we're talking about recordings in Zoom, if you've recorded to the cloud in your Zoom meetings, which is what most people do, those recordings will be available to students in here automatically once the meeting finishes. You have control over whether you want them all to be available to students, and this publish all recordings toggle on the right-hand side is on by default. However, if you have recordings that you don't want students to see, toggle it off, and then you get to individually decide whether you want this one, the next one, the other one available to them. So for example, people using the Zoom tool for interactive orals and wanting those not to be visible to all the rest of the cohort, toggle off your publish all recording setting and only turn on the ones that you want students to be able to see. You have that level of control. Let me stop there. Charlotte has a question. Go ahead.
Just with the cloud recordings, how long do they stay there for?
Excellent question.
Do they leave? Yeah.
Right. So our Zoom account settings at CSU preserve recordings for 365 days. So the recording will stay live and available for a year, and then it auto deletes. So at that point, if you wanted to preserve a recording, you would need to download it and put it somewhere else that it is preserved. So usually people end up putting them in Panopto, for example, or into your YouTube channel if your school has a YouTube channel, things like that. Students have access to their subject site for a year, so they would be able to come back into the subject site and watch a recording, and it would still be active for 365 days. But after that, if you want it to be persistently available, you need to get it out of Zoom and put it somewhere else where it can be preserved. All right. I'm going to keep going for a bit, and then I'm going to go back through some of the other questions, etc., because there are a few things that I want to show you in terms of features, etc. While I'm looking at the Zoom integration here, I want to point out to you that after you've finished having a meeting, it comes off the upcoming meetings list and into previous. And at that point, you can see the dates. You also get access to a meeting report, which will show you who attended. So you get an attendee report to your Zoom meetings through this screen, through previous meetings. You can see here, Lachlan, the teacher, has access to a personal meeting room. Can I just give you a general piece of advice? never use your personal meeting room for your teaching. Don't use it to create meetings. Always create a new meeting ID with Zoom. And the reason for that is your recordings are going to get all mixed up and not accessible to students if you end up using your personal meeting room settings. It is inevitable that that will happen. So just avoid using your personal meeting room for your teaching as a general rule. Create a new meeting ID each time. Cloud recordings we looked at a second ago in that tab. You can see here that there are 2 files that I have preserved for students from this previous meeting. If we go into it, the students can get access to a video recording that they can download or watch. We also get the audio version of it. They can get just the MP3 file to watch. And there is a recording analytics feature which will show you how many people have listened to it. It does not talk to Brightspace and tell you who they were. So it's like how many clicks, how many views, how many listens. That's it. Surface level analytics. So it's not comprehensive as such. It'll just give you a very high level. Let me go back to the question we had before about creating a meeting that doesn't have a particular set time. So that same scenario we looked at, if I didn't want to set dates, weekly online meeting without setting them with dates, still have your start date and time, but instead of setting something here, we go down to the recurring box and we change the recurrence to no fixed time. The moment that we do that, it removes all of those date and time settings that we were looking at a minute ago. That just gives us a perpetual Zoom meeting room link that we can use. Maybe I'll put that in the title. And then we finish creating the session, and at that point it will appear in the list, but not in any calendars because it has no date condition. So I have a meeting that I've created. I have a link to that meeting that I would then need to provide to people somewhere else. Otherwise, they'd need to come into the list and find it and know to click on it, for example. It just sits there in upcoming meetings indefinitely. Okay, so that was for Asta's question before. Okay, the other function I want to draw your attention to inside the Zoom integration in Brightspace is that if you've created a meeting already in Zoom beforehand and it's not in here, but you want it in here so that you can see it all. So this one's for you, Nicole. You can take the meeting ID. So let me find a meeting ID for a Zoom meeting somewhere in here. Which one? Let's pick, I don't have any previous meetings. That's helpful. Let's schedule a meeting in the Zoom portal just quickly. We'll call it sample and that'll do. Save, create the meeting. What I want is the meeting ID, this number. As long as you have a meeting ID that you've created somewhere in Zoom, you can copy that. And then back in our subject site, Zoom integration. So if we go into online meeting Zoom, open this up, the meeting that I'd made somewhere else is not in here. I want it in here. You can import it. And the way that you import is click over here on the 3 dots and import the meeting. Now it wants the meeting ID, paste the meeting ID, import, and it will now bring all of that meeting information from Zoom into this list somewhere. So the word sample will be somewhere in here once this refreshes. So you can bring the meeting in, Nicole. All right, I'll have to have a look at it with you to find out what's happened to them. So yes, you can import. You can also import Zoom meetings into multiple subject sites. So for those of you with a paired subject, for example, if you create the Zoom meeting in one of your subject sites and you want students in the other subject to also attend the same Zoom meetings, you just use that same process. Copy the meeting ID and then import it into that other site in the same way, and your students will be able to join from either location. So you can absolutely use the same Zoom meeting in multiple subject sites. All right, let me stop there and see if I have any massive questions. A little bit trickier for me to keep my eye on the chat here. Can you link Brightspace topic modules to edit event? That's an excellent question, Riley, and you absolutely can. In that calendar, find an event, edit the event, and then you'll see add content up here. It will allow you to link that calendar entry to anything inside your subject site, whether it's content, for example. If I'm saying this week's meeting, I want you to be looking at week 1's content, but this will only be through the calendar entry. So they need to go to it through the calendar to see that connection. Does importing work for recurring? It absolutely does, Catherine. It'll bring that same single recurring link in then. All right. Before I get too far off track, I'm going to draw it back to some of the new features that I want to show you in Zoom. All right. We looked at the LTI a little bit. I talked about the desktop app. I'm going to park meeting chat for a second. Let's talk about recordings with Zoom because I get this question quite a bit. When we make a recording in Zoom, you need to go into the Zoom portal to do anything with that recording. So what I'm talking about with that is going into charlessturt.zoom.us, sign into your account, find the recording that you're talking about in your recordings item over here on the left in the menu. I have access to just about everyone's recordings, so ignoring that. Let me find some of mine. Can I do an advanced search and find some just for Lachlan? No. How about shared with me? That'll do. No, none of those. This is not helping me. Accounts, recordings. My settings in Zoom are a little bit different to everyone else's because I've got this sort of admin level access. So I just need to find one that I have made. Host name, let's do that. All right, all of these people have made recordings in rooms made by me, which is why I'm seeing them all. Let's open one of these for just a second. If I wanted to edit a recording, I need to open the recording first. It opens in this screen. And as long as you are the host who created the meeting, you'll see this little pair of scissors over here at the bottom right-hand side of the recording, which turns on your trim settings. And at that point, you can use these handlebars to drag the start and the end points of your recording. So we can edit or crop where the recording starts and finishes. Use the play button just to make sure it's doing what you want it to, starting or stopping where you want. That's the first part of Zoom editing. But you might say, well, it's not at the start or the end that I want to actually edit. It's in the middle. The beautiful part about this tool is that we can, in fact, create multiple trim points. So I can create another one. Click inside the timeline here, hitting the plus. So I want to include that. And I want to include that. And I want to include that. So you can do as many of these cropping points as you like. It's a little fiddly. It's not one timeline that allows you to say just that bit, just that bit. You actually have to go through and identify the bits that you want to include, which are in blue, and the bits that are outside the blue that you want to exclude. Once you're happy with what the recording looks like, when you hit play and it only plays the stuff that's in blue, then you hit trim and it applies it to the live recording and any recording the students download. So you can crop and edit using this functionality and it will apply those changes to the recording, particularly if they download the file. Previously, it only applied it to them if they played it back live in the browser. If they downloaded it, they got the whole file, which is no good. Now it actually applies it to the whole thing. So that is editing in Zoom very, very quickly. Have a play around with it when you make a recording so you get familiar with this cropping function. It doesn't allow you to do anything else to the recording really apart from surface level cropping. Okay, next thing. Let's talk about Zoom Clips. All right, there is a new feature in Zoom called Clips. This may be a real so what moment for you, but let's see how we go. If you open the Zoom portal that we were looking at a minute ago by going to charlessturt.zoom.us, hitting sign in, you will see a function on the left now called Clips. Clips effectively are up to 2-minute recordings that you can make on the spot. And those recordings don't require you to run an actual Zoom meeting to make them. So if you want to make a 2-minute recording in Zoom, you can do that. Make a new clip. And effectively, it will allow you to make either a screencast or just a webcam capture or just your microphone, for example, or both together. It asks which tools you want to use for it, and then it makes the recording up to 2 minutes. Once you've made the recording, let me go back. It appears here in your clips area, and you can share that recording to other people. So it's a way of making new recordings quickly without starting a whole Zoom meeting, turning the recording on, and then sharing it. What else can we do with it? Making up to 2-minute recordings is not a huge thing for me. We have plenty of tools that can do that. But one thing I do like about this tool is that I can do things like open up the share settings, embed the recording. So if I wanted to embed this 2-minute recording that I've made into a subject page so that students can click on it and watch it, I can get the embed code from here. That's not nothing. It's kind of handy if I can do it really quick and easy. So what kind of recordings do you make that go up to 2 minutes? Maybe a welcome for the week or something. I don't know. Like it has some possibility because it's so quick and easy to launch and make a recording without running a whole meeting, going into Teams or into Zoom or Panopto and launching all the software. I can do it very quickly and easily using this tool. The other thing that I like about it is from the Zoom desktop app, opening this up again, there is a Clips tab up the top. So I can open this tool, click Clips, and make a new clip on the spot from here as well. So you can access that same list without having to go into the Zoom backend and make a new recording and then share it in the same way. So it's a bit gimmicky, but I don't hate it, is about as much as I'll say about that. One thing I have to show you though, which is an amazing improvement for Zoom, is that they have finally fixed the whiteboard tool. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Zoom whiteboards. We used to go into the Zoom portal, and then at the back end on the left here, we had whiteboards, and then you get this massive list of templates and other things. And you could make a new whiteboard to share with participants in a live Zoom meeting, which sort of only the people that turned up could edit it. Not amazing. They fixed it, is all I want to say, is that they fixed it, which means that I can create a new whiteboard and I can share it to people whether they're in Zoom meetings or not. It's usable in the live meeting, before, during, after, and I can do other things with it. Just create a blank whiteboard and then people can come in and start doodling on it. Maybe I can put a bit of structure into it and give people access to it by clicking share, and then they can write on it. I'm not going to actually share this one with you because I have another one which is a little better. And I'm going to open the Zoom desktop app and show you that there is a tab here now called Whiteboards, which will show you all of your whiteboards in this little space. I want to have a look at mine, not this other templated garbage. Okay, here's one that I made before, basic demo whiteboard. I'm going to get a link to it. I'm going to drop the link in here for you. And if we open this whiteboard, I'll open it in full screen up here. Here we have a basic whiteboard, which is a little bit tiny for my liking, but effectively I can see a bunch of people jumping in. And it allows you, apart from your drawing, etc., to be able to zoom in down the bottom right-hand corner. Let's move this into the center and make it a bit bigger. And you can add post-it notes over here on the left, sticky notes, which I could see people doing. And if there's enough structure in this thing, it is obvious what you do with it. So you create, I literally made 3 lines and 3 words, and people already know what to do with the whiteboard at that point. Add a sticky note, click anywhere in here, put in the words that you want in there, choose the color, choose the text, do whatever you like, and you have an interactive, collaborative workspace quickly and easily. Now, because they fixed the share settings, I don't have to worry about people having access to the Zoom meeting, having accepted something, being at CSU. I don't need any of that. You click on share, check the share settings, and make sure that it's anyone with the link can edit. And at that point, we have an asynchronous or synchronous tool that you can give to anybody. That is a massive improvement on what it used to be, and it gets better. We get an embed code, which means if I want to actually put my whiteboard into a subject site for students to play with, they don't have to go anywhere near a Zoom meeting. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to my subject site in Brightspace. I'm going to make a content area. Give me a page, make a new page. And inside my page in Brightspace, I'm going to go to my code view, which is this little button here. Paste the embed code, Control V, hit save. And I now have an interactive whiteboard in my subject site for students to play with and add and do whatever they like. I don't know why it's showing me tips about this. I don't need tips, thanks. It's loading the board. Here we go. Right, so here's my interactive whiteboard inside my subject site that students can play around with and add and do things with over here on the left. It's a little compressed because I'm looking at it in the editor view, but you get the idea. Right, so we get an interactive whiteboard finally that's not about being in Teams, having a Miro account, joining a Zoom meeting, any of those things, just a separate independent whiteboard. And I can see that people have been able to jump in and add posts and things. So have a play around with the Zoom whiteboard tool. It is a massive improvement on what they used to have. I will also draw your attention to a couple of other nifty features inside the whiteboard. Let me find the one that we were all just looking at a second ago. Where's it hiding? Here it is. All right. They also have a laser pointer. Do I want students to follow the laser pointer? Okay, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this. Great. What else have we got? We have a timer. You're only going to be working on this activity for the next 30 seconds, whatever, etc. You can turn that on with that on here. That's fun. I don't mind that. Go. And then the students get a timer while they're in the activity. What else have we got? We have voting. Voting means that I can create areas on the whiteboard that I want the students to number and prioritize which ones they think are important. So think about that in terms of a brainstorming activity, and you've got 6, 7, 8, however many distinct areas, and you want the students to vote or prioritize or identify different parts of the whiteboard. You can do that by creating a voting session. Oh, time's up. Did that stop people from editing? It did not. Okay, but anyway, the timer worked. What else have we got? I can present it as a slideshow. And if you have multiple whiteboards and you create new whiteboards by, where do you do it, Lachlan? Here we go. There's an area up here called page, it has a number 1 on it, and it will allow you to create multiple whiteboards that you can jump between. So this tool really has just improved in leaps and bounds from what it used to be. You just got to play around with it a little bit and find out where all the different options are. And you will be doing a lot more sophisticated things than identifying whether or not you had tomatoes on biscuits, for example, for lunch today. So I do love the Zoom whiteboard now compared to what it used to be. The fact that it is independent is amazing. All right. Let me jump back to my board before I get too carried away with whiteboard envy. What else can I show you? We talked about clips. I think I'm going to skip past breakouts for a second and talk a little bit about surveys and polls just briefly. What's the difference between a survey and a poll in Zoom? Let me start my presentation somewhere. Let's move on to where they were. Not clips, not breakouts. Okay, polls and quizzes, polls and surveys. In Zoom terminology, a quiz and a poll are tools that you can only use in a Zoom meeting. So you create the quiz questions or the poll questions. They're only useful really to you in a live Zoom meeting. The survey option in Zoom, which you can either create before using the Zoom desktop app. So if I come back to Zoom desktop, under more, you will see the surveys option is up here. So you can create your surveys in advance. All right, Arnella, I'll have a look at breakouts in a second. You can create new surveys in here. You can also have a look at all of the results through this little dashboard without having to go diving through the back end of Zoom. You can distribute the survey links to people like the whiteboards outside of Zoom meetings. They operate independently. So if you just want to create a survey quickly and you don't want to run Zoom meetings, etc., you can do it through here. Come in here, create a new survey, and share the link to the survey. So it gives you a survey tool, quick and easy, basically, outside of having to run live online meetings or use another tool to get hold of it. I don't hate that. I like having that sort of toy or functionality available to me without having to run a live meeting to get it. So that's the difference between surveys, quizzes, and polls. Surveys are available outside live meetings. Yes, responses can be anonymized in all of those tools. It's a toggle when you first create them, Randy. So that applies to quizzes, polls, and surveys. So have a play with those tools. They are very, very simple to use. If I wanted to create a new, don't show me what's new in polls and quizzes. If I wanted to create a new one, create a poll or quiz, the types of questions that you get in polls, multiple choice, which actually means multiple answer in Zoom terminology. So it means checking multiple options. It's not what we think of when we say multiple choice. That's single choice. A matching activity, which will give you a bunch of options on the left, a bunch of answers on the right, and you have to drag and drop. The ones that you choose are appropriate. A ranking activity, so prioritizing a number of responses. You can get open response, which is not horrible in a Zoom meeting if you want to just collect student open responses. A bit longer if you want more text. There's a close activity, filling in the blanks. I don't know that many people that go to the effort of creating fill in the blank exercises for a Zoom meeting. It seems a little cross-purpose to me. Or you can create Likert scales, basically ratings against a number of options. Those are your options when you create polls, quizzes, and surveys. The question types are the same. All right, let's talk about breakouts while I'm racing against the clock here. Breakouts in Zoom are quite interesting. You actually really need to do it within a live Zoom meeting. Trying to create them beforehand requires that everyone that's going to be in the meeting has a Zoom account. Otherwise, they're not going to be affected by the breakout rooms you create in advance. And you may or may not be aware that students actually have a very convoluted account system and mailbox sitting behind their activity. So trying to identify what all those student email addresses are for those Zoom accounts is horrible. Don't do it. So use breakouts by creating them in a live meeting. So I'm going to create a live Zoom session now. I don't expect you to join it. We just don't have time. So I'm creating a live Zoom meeting. It's going to complain about the fact that my webcam is being used somewhere else. That's why there's no video here, because it's being used in Teams. All right, so here's my live Zoom room. Features down the bottom through the taskbar that you're probably familiar with, things like the chat, keeping an eye on the participants that are in the meeting along the left here. But what we're looking for right now is to talk about breakout rooms. So I'm going to click on breakouts, and this is only available to the host. The host has control over creating and modifying breakouts. So when we go to create breakouts in Zoom, it's important that you understand that there are 3 stages to breakouts: creation, editing, those that already exist, and the live breakout. So you need to always be aware of which phase you're in. Right now I'm creating. So I'm going to create, let's go with 3 breakout rooms, and I automatically want to split everyone in here into those 3 rooms. So if there's 3 people, there'll be 1 in each. If there's 30 people, there'll be 10 in each. It will automatically split them up. And when you're in this process, it will tell you down the bottom, based on the number of participants you have in the meeting, how many are going to go into each. So it gives you this little summary down the bottom, how many are going into each of those rooms. Do you want to manually assign all the people in the list into different breakouts? You can do that here. Otherwise, splits them up automatically. And then there's a third option, which is an interesting one, that basically says let them choose which one they go into. So if you're setting up the type of activity where each breakout represents a different choice, essentially, of which room, you can choose that bottom option. Hit create. I now have 3 breakout rooms. I still haven't started the breakout. So I'm not in live. I'm now in edit, editing the breakouts that have been created. When we have a look at those, it'll give you a list of everyone who's been enrolled into those breakouts, and you can move them from one to the other. So just because you assigned them automatically, you can still modify who goes into which one later on, as long as you're the host. There are some options down here at the bottom left. This is a good time to show them to you. You can change some of those initial settings after the fact. So if you want the students to be able to then modify which one they're in, you can change that setting here. Do you want your participants to be able to jump out of the breakouts and come back to the main room whenever they want? That's checked by default. Maybe you want them to stay in there until you finish the breakout activity. If that's the case, make sure that is unchecked. When you start the breakouts, do you want everyone to be pushed into those breakout rooms? Probably. Or do you want to have to wait for them to choose to join a breakout? If it's the former, make sure this is checked. Otherwise, you're going to be having ghosts in the list who aren't really paying attention, who haven't joined the breakouts. Okay, and when you finish, do you want them to be brought back to the main room automatically, or do you want them to have to choose when they come back to join everybody? I'd probably leave the default options on. Okay, how long do you want them to go for? So there's your timer for the breakouts. I want this one to run for 5 minutes. Do I need to be notified when the time's up? Probably not. I got a feeling that I'm going to know when the activity's finished. And then also, do they get a timer in the room inside the breakout that it's about to finish? This is usually a good idea because at that point people know I need to wrap things up. Right, so set the timer for however long you like in your options. We're now at the point where I'm probably ready to open the breakouts and start them, which I'm going to do. So every participant has been invited to join breakout rooms. I have 0 participants in this meeting, so it's not affecting them, but breakouts are now in live. So at that point, it's telling me that the breakout rooms are in progress and they've been running for 20 seconds or so. So that timer is clicking down at the bottom. At that point, if I wanted to send a message to everyone who's in the breakout rooms, there is a button here that says broadcast. And I can either send a message, which is going to capture what I'm saying into the microphone and play it to them, or do I want to send a text message? So whatever you're going to send, room 1, get on task, whatever you might be saying, it's going to be broadcast to everybody. When you hit broadcast, it appears up the top for them and then disappears after about 10 seconds. Or I could play that audio message. The other thing that you can do as part of your sharing options when you are the host is that if you choose to share when a breakout is running, click on share in Zoom, we have the option to share to breakout rooms. So that means that you could share a document or your screen from your computer to all breakouts at once. So if you're ever worried that they're not looking at the right thing inside the breakout rooms, share your screen once you've started them and click share to breakout rooms. And at that point, whatever it is that you're sharing, whether it's a screen, a document, a file, it will be pushed to all of the breakout rooms at the same time. So that's not a terrible function. So that's me glossing over breakout rooms very, very quickly. I'm now going to end my breakouts, close all the rooms, and it brings me back to phase 2, edit the rooms. So remember I said create the rooms, edit the rooms, and the live breakout rooms. Those are the 3 phases. I'm now at phase 2. If I wanted to create breakouts from scratch, I would actually need to go to recreate basically, and that will take me back to phase 1. Can you, as the host, jump in and out of the breakout rooms? Absolutely. The host has the ability to jump between all the different rooms. Co-hosts, not so much. If you've got other people in there, other staff, other teachers, you need to assign them into those different rooms. Riley, you have a question.
Oh, there was one above. I love breakout rooms, but I mentioned it and they all dropped offline.
Yeah, look,
It's
what can I say? I think it depends on the cohort. It depends on how much structure you have. I can give you my personal take on it, which is that free-form breakouts don't really work. You're going to have 1 or 2 extroverts potentially who engage with that, and then a whole bunch of ghosts or other people that go, or the others who go, what are we meant to be doing? Breakouts that have structure, from my experience, in terms of the instructions before the breakouts launch and during the breakout. So instructions shared in the breakout text that say, you should all be doing this. So that share option that I talked about a minute ago of me sharing the instructions for the breakouts to all the breakout rooms is probably a really good idea. That
Yeah,
way
I
they
love
know.
that.
Keep
Yeah, I
them
love that
on
sort of
task. Yeah.
And are you saying maybe even make them aware in the beginning of the Zoom or even before the Zoom that, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to embed it in the subject outline to just actually make it aware that this is happening, just to mentally prepare them. Like,
I think what I'm saying is in the Zoom meeting itself, before you launch the breakouts, you tell them what they're going to be expected to do during the breakout activity. You give them that instruction. That's the first part. During the breakouts themselves, you can share that instruction so that they've got that reminder, and you don't have people saying, what are we meant to be doing? Yeah, it's all that a kind of extra scaffolding. You're going to get some student groups that are far more autonomous, independent, capable, etc. But usually breakouts that I've seen that work really well have a lot of structure in place around expectation. What am I doing as the facilitator? What am I expecting the participants to do? Have you set up roles within it? For example, I need someone to take notes. I need someone to be the speaker back to the group when we get back together. I need answers to this particular focus questions when we finish our 2 minutes, etc. Explicit expectations is what I would suggest.
thank you.
That's okay. And we are fast approaching time, so let me see all the things that I've missed in my Padlet wall. I am happy to hang around after time, of course, and answer other questions. What haven't I talked about? Zoom Notes. Let's talk about Zoom Notes very, very briefly. There is a function in Zoom called Notes. It allows you to share a scribble space inside the Zoom meeting. If I open up my live Zoom meeting that I had here, where was it? Where was it? Where was it? That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. Let's open the Zoom desktop application and return to my meeting. Okay, notes you will find as the host down here in your taskbar. It says notes. Let's click notes and it opens up a shared writing space. I'm going to create a new one. If you've made any before, you can bring them in so that everyone else can see them, but I'm going to make a new note. Effectively, this is a collaborative document inside the Zoom meeting that everyone can write in that is not the chat channel. So at that point, important stuff going in here. And then you get to decide what you're going to be doing with these notes as you're going through. Do you want to share them? I want to share them. Who do I want to share it with? I can share it with everyone in the meeting. Do I want to give people who have CSU accounts, for example, access to the link as well after the fact? So this is not as good as the whiteboard tool. I don't just get a public collaborative document that anybody can access just because they have the link. This is a little bit more restricted. People that are in the meeting, people at CSU will be able to get access to the document. So I don't hate it for a live meeting tool. It'll ask you, do you want them to be able to collaborate and write into the notes in the live meeting or just for you? So it's not bad. I think in a live meeting, if you've got people in there and you want someone in the meeting to be able to take notes, add to the notes, that's not bad. Collaborative document in a live Zoom meeting. Maybe have a think about it, a play about how you might use this inside your Zoom tool. All right, minimize the Zoom meeting and see, what did I have right at the end there? Oh, there's a meeting timer. Yes, let me show you that. In Zoom, you may or may not be aware that there is an option for a timer. And you'll find the timer. Where do we find the timer? Under apps. Under apps, there is an option for a tool called Meeting Timer that you can search for and turn on. I have it already installed. So when I click on, I tell a lie. Why is it not appearing? Maybe I will find this later and talk to you about it. I'll put it in the stream where the detail is. We're looking for the word timer or meeting timer, and it will give you either a countdown or duration. Oh, here it is. It's already on. You idiot, Lachlan. Okay. Up here, right at the top, I have an option called Meeting Timer that is turned on. You can choose it to either show how long the meeting has been running. So it's got the duration up there showing me that I've been going for 12.5 minutes. Or there is also an app that you have access to called the Timer app. You can install it in your apps area and it will give you either a stopwatch or an activity countdown, for example, if you want it. Maybe it's got value to you, maybe it doesn't. If you're interested in having this turned on, you will find the meeting timer option available to you through the Zoom desktop app when you go having a look at your settings. So I'm going to click on my profile image, go to settings, and the meeting timer controls are here on this first page, show meeting timers. So if you want them, that's where you turn them on. All right, I'm going to stop there because it's 2 minutes past. I am actually going to stop the recording, but I'm happy to hang around and answer any other questions that you may have. So let's stop the recording. For those of you that need to take off, etc., thank you for joining us for